I live in the town of Anaconda, Montana, and I used to work at the Copper Bowl. We all used to joke around about Wilbur, the previous owner, who haunted the place. At first it was just little things that would happen. Casino machines would all of a sudden have credits on them when no one was there, which could be a mechanical malfunction. Things would move from one place to another, but nothing was as horrifying as what happened one Saturday morning. It was earlier in the morning, and it was just the cook and I. He was telling me about the reflection of a woman he had seen a few nights before in one of the windows, but when the spot where she was supposed to be was investigated, no one was there. These kind of scarier stories were becoming more and more commonplace, and we knew that Wilbur wasn't alone. That morning, we had gone over to the bowling alley, which is next door. It was always dark in there until the owners came, and always cold. In the dark, you could hear someone walking across the boards, which makes a very distinct sound. Now, what I mean by walking across the boards is that someone is walking in the gutters or on the lanes themselves. You could hear the footsteps coming towards us, but there was no one there. You could also hear the jingling of keys. A little while later, we were alone in the restaurant, and you could hear things next door getting louder. Not just footsteps this time, but other noises that we just couldn't explain. The cook had to go over to the bowling alley to get ice and was gone for what seemed like a very long time, so I went over to find him. As I walked through the door, there was a really intense feeling, one that I've only had a few times in my life, and it was the feeling of get the heck out of there, but I had to find my coworker. When I called his name the first time, I got no answer, so I walked up towards the bar. As I walked up the stairs, I heard what sounded like a gurgling noise that comes from deep inside the back of the throat, and I got the chills. I called his name again, and this time he answered me, but it sounded very faint. Again I called his name, and it seemed to be as loud as it should be, considering he was only 4 feet from me. A little while later, we went over there again to have our cigarettes, and I saw a black figure at the other end of the alley walk across. My coworker saw the panic in my face and turned around. He then turned to me and told me we had to get the hell out of there. I found out that Wilbur had died when he drowned on a fishing trip. Needless to say, I quit not long after that. My better half and I were looking for a larger apartment to rent. Because he works mornings and I work afternoons, I ended up doing a lot of our house hunting alone. I went to look at around 5 different houses and apartments one day. They were all far too generic, little boxes in apartment complexes, until the last one. This last house was an old mill house, made into a duplex. It was huge. The ceilings were 15 feet. The rooms were massive. It was a great house, about 9 years old, and oh so cool. My boyfriend came to look at it the next day and also liked it, so we moved in. It was little things at first, an odd pounding on the wall that we attributed to our rambunctious neighbor, cold winds that we thought were just the usual drafts of an old house, but the cat, we couldn't explain the cat. Our kitty is a smart little beastie, more so than the average feline. He wouldn't go upstairs without one of us. If he was asleep on the bed and he left the room, he would go streaking past you down the stairs. He would sit and stare at something in the corner. He would leap up from a nap and chase his tail, like someone had pulled it. We didn't even really think about it. We figured the cat was weirded out by the move. Then more concrete, odd things began to happen. I would see little figures out of the corner of my eye, quick shadows that were gone before I could turn my head. Or I would hear laughter, but it would vanish just as quickly. Sometimes I would hear crying as I walked up the stairs. But these things were always short and soft enough that I would think it was a trick of my mind. My boyfriend and I were watching a movie one night when something happened that convinced me I wasn't insane or overly imaginative. My boyfriend, who does not believe at all and is incredibly pragmatic, suddenly stopped the movie. He asked me if I heard that. "What?" I replied. He looked at me and said, "Children screaming." I hadn't heard it, but I could see how upset he was. And more odd things have happened since then. My boyfriend and I love kids, especially me. It's a running joke that I'm a baby magnet. Kids love me. We have several friends who bring their young children over to visit, or for me to babysit. So I have toys all over the house. Our kitchen and living room are connected by a doorway with no door, so you can see straight through. I was making a tuna fish sandwich a couple of days ago and happened to glance into the living room. A small, brightly colored ball rolled across the floor. At first, I thought the cat must be playing with it, and then I realized the cat was sitting next to me, hoping to catch some floor-bound tuna. I was the only one home. My boyfriend swears that he saw a blonde-haired kid in our kitchen, hiding under the table. I was babysitting our friend's toddler that day, and he figured it was Mickey. So he snuck over, planning to lift up the tablecloth and play peekaboo. But when he lifted the tablecloth, no one was there. Mikey and I were 2 blocks away at the park. I know I've gone through all this setup, and nothing really freaky's happened, so here's the clincher. It happened this morning. That's why I'm writing this now. I woke up late. My boyfriend had gone to work, and I was planning to laze around the house and maybe do some yard work. I laid down on our couch and decided to watch a movie, and I apparently dozed off. I woke up because someone was crawling onto the couch. Seriously. To anyone who has kids or spends a lot of time with them, you know what this is like. You're napping and feel tiny hands on the couch. Then a little body crawls up and snuggles down next to you. This has happened so many times that at first it didn't even faze me. Then I realized that none of the munchkins I'd take care of were in the house. No one was in the house, and when I sat up, the weight was gone, and no one was there. None of this scares me. I rented this house because I told my better half that it felt happy, like a home. The only thing I can come up with is that the children of whatever mill worker lived in this house are still around, and that's okay. I hope they like us in our home. I'd rather have happy little ghosts than not so nice other ones. I'm so glad this site is here, and I can tell someone about these events. Our friends just laugh. Great work. I've had a few ghostly occurrences happen to me, but 2 really stand out. I call it Lady with the Long Black Hair. When I was a little girl, growing up in Somerville, Massachusetts, I was around 3, I think. I would wake up every night because of a bad dream. I would then make my way to my parents' room to sleep for the remainder of the night. I would have to pass through the kitchen to get there. The lights were out, but there was some light coming in the windows from the street lights. I would see her sitting on the kitchen counter, up against the wall by one of the windows, a lady with the long black hair, which is how I always referred to her. She was dressed in a long black dress, pale-faced but shadowy, with illuminated green eyes. She would just be sitting there and looking right at me. It always took my breath away. I was so afraid of her. I would inch my way towards my mother's room with my back against the wall, never taking my eyes off her. Her eyes followed my progress across the room. I always thought, she's going to jump off the counter and get me, but that never happened. Years later, my mom told me she had strange things happen to her in that house too, but that's another story. In another story, my Nana came to visit me. Years later, living as an adult in Hampton, Virginia. One night, I was awakened by something. When I opened my eyes and looked around, I was startled to see my Nana sitting in bed with me. Nana had died 6 months earlier. It was kind of scary because she was gray and just slightly transparent. Also, she had a shocked look on her face, almost like she was the scared one. Then in my head, I heard her voice saying, "Shh, go back to sleep," which I did. The next day, I remembered it all quite clearly, and thinking on it, I feel like she had been surprised that I had woken up and was looking right at her. I don't think she bargained on that when she come to visit me. Hey, my name is Tyler, and this is the story of my sightings of the ghost in my uncle's house. I moved to Bend, Oregon to live and work with my uncle, and I slept upstairs where nothing happened at all for the first 3 months. Then my dad and 2 brothers moved in also, so I had to move downstairs. Well, downstairs had like its own living room, a bathroom in the bedroom with its door next to the stairs. Well, we used to hear 2 sets of footsteps upstairs walking around when there was no one up there. Sometimes we would think it was my brother and his friends. But when my little brother went up to check the door, it was locked and they were still out. One night, my brother fell asleep on the couch, and when he woke up, he heard a very loud scream, like a woman being killed downstairs. When the scream happened, our cat ran up the stairs, hit the hardwood floors, and ran right into the room, under the bed. Also, right up the stairs, our fridge faced a window with the oven right in front of the fridge door. There was a magnet calendar on the freezer door, and one night, while watching television, me and my brother and my dad were scared when we heard a loud bang in the kitchen, and then the calendar was thrown hard down the stairs and hit the door downstairs. Thing about it is that there is no way that the calendar could have went downstairs at the angle it was. The thing that made me really believe in ghosts, though, was this one night. After my dad went to bed, I watched some TV, and it was summertime out, so it was hot, and I decided to sleep on the floor. When I was about to fall into sleep, I heard a light chuckle behind me, which I thought was my dad. But when I looked behind me, there was absolutely no one. I tried to go to sleep again, and the same thing happened, and I got a little angry. Well, again, I was about to fall asleep when I had the feeling that someone was looking at me. When I opened my eyes, there was a gray male figure, about 6 feet long, and a dark figure, about 5'10", standing right next to me. And when I looked at them both, they both looked back at me. I got so scared that I closed my eyes and prayed that they would leave. And when I opened my eyes again, they were both walking. Again, I closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, they turned the corner and went up the stairs. I picked up my pillow and ran into my dad's room. He woke up right when I got into his room, and when he asked what happened, I told him in a very shaken voice that I saw a ghost. Right when that happened, we both heard 2 sets of footsteps right above our heads, and the door opened and closed with a lot of force. After that night, I believed in ghosts, and there's nothing in the future that will ever change my mind. Hi, my story happened a long time ago. I was 17, and it was the evening of the 1989 earthquake here in Northern California. I was staying at a family friend's house for the night. I had known them for several years, and they'd always told ghost stories while we would camp. The husband's brother had just died when he was 5 years old. He got hit by a car. He said he thinks that his brother was still around. They still lived on the same property that he grew up on. Anyway, to get to the story, that evening, we all went to bed. They had a small house and had me sleep in the kids' room, and the kids slept in the living room. Everyone was turned in for the night. All of a sudden, the lights started flickering. The dad yelled for the kids to stop messing around. It wasn't that. We all ended up getting out of bed. The lights continued to flicker and then turn off completely. We turned the light switches on, and nothing. We looked outside, and other people's homes were still lit up, so it wasn't a power outage. I just figured with the earthquake and all who knows, I wasn't scared at the time. We all went back to bed and giggled a little and made a few jokes about the ghost. I laid back down, and before long, the lights started up again, and then the drawers in the bathroom started opening and closing, slamming hard. At this point, I was scared. I ran into the master bedroom and told them I wasn't sleeping by myself. I thought I would sleep on the floor at the foot of the bed. We were all a little scared. All of a sudden, the most horrible, inhuman sound came. Like I said, it was a small house. It sounded like the home had surround sound. It came from every corner of the house. This loud, guttural scream or moan. It was a long moment, and then it all stopped. I sat there and cried. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I couldn't wait to get out of there. I told them in the morning that I would never be back to their home. I felt that whatever it was, didn't like an outsider in the house. I look back at that night and wonder about it. I lost contact with the family. It has been close to 20 years now. At the time, it made me a firm believer in the paranormal. Now as I get older and am more skeptical, I can't help but wonder if it's some kind of joke. I don't see how. At the time, I don't even think there was such thing as a surround sound. And that is the only way that sound could have come from the house. It was as if the house itself was screaming. That is the only paranormal experience that I have ever had. Just thought I would share it. Thanks. My friend Helen and I had been in our local pub for most of the evening. We had been drinking cola all night, but decided to walk down to another one close by, as there was a band that we liked that was playing there. The town that we lived in is quiet and unassuming, so we thought nothing of walking through the cemetery that was on the way to the other pub. You're probably thinking, oh, here we go, another cemetery story. It was right in the middle of the two pubs, so it was the usual quick walk. It was around 9:30 p.m. on a Sunday night in October 1998, so it was pretty dark. We chatted and walked down the path and into the cemetery, not giving it a second thought. All of a sudden, Helen grabbed my arm and froze on the spot. "What the heck is that?" she gasped. Thinking she was trying to scare me, I just laughed and looked over to where she was pointing. I could feel her shaking as she held on to me. To help you picture the scene, the path runs directly through the middle of the cemetery, with graves on both sides, the church to the left, and a row of cottages just the other side of the graves, and a little hedge to the right. To my horror, there was something very large, tall and black, making its way along the small road, which runs along the side of the cottages. We're only about 15 yards away, but there was absolute silence. No footsteps, breathing, or noise of any kind. The thing was sort of gliding along at a steady pace, as we couldn't see the bottom of it because of the graves in a small hedge. We couldn't see any legs or anything, but the way it moved looked like it was on a bike. We both stood, rooted to the spot, and watched it for around 30 seconds. It moved around the row of cottages and down a small alley that runs along the side of the library. The odd thing was that it was huge, much taller than the downstairs windows of the cottages, and it was a sort of square shape. It's very hard to describe, but it was definitely not a person. It made absolutely no noise and moved very softly and smoothly. We were terrified. When it had gone, we just looked at each other and ran back to the pub. We told a couple of our friends, but they just laughed at us and said that we were seeing things. But We knew what we'd seen, and it really frightened us. We're not the kind of girls that scare easily, and are very level-headed. On occasions, we still mention it. We even went along there in daylight to try and find a plausible explanation, even trying to work out how tall it must have been, but we never came up with anything. My name is John, and this is the second seriously strange experience that I had with the paranormal, supernatural, or whatever you want to call it. This experience happened back in 1985 or 86 when I was 17 or 18. I was with a religious group, and we were on a religious retreat in Ohio. While we were all on a trip back to Massachusetts, we stopped over at a religious retreat center just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to rest, relax, and enjoy ourselves. I just wanted to give you a bit of background story here before getting into what happened, so that you know where my head was at. At the time, I was a very quiet, reserved, and shy type of person, yet I wasn't antisocial in the least. I was learning how to develop a more serious, deep, and more meaningful relationship with myself, others, and my creator. I was feeling good about myself, confident, yet not arrogant, strong, yet not violent. I was feeling the most positive, and the happiest I ever been in my life, because I was beginning to feel like I belonged somewhere, and a part of a community. Now, on to the story and what brought me here. I was hanging out with a bunch of people in the rec room, talking, playing pool, and having a great time. About 12:30 or 1 in the morning, I decided to call it a night and headed to my room. When I got there, my roommates were already asleep, so I quietly got my stuff, went to the bathroom, got changed, and ready for bed. I had this funny feeling that something was wrong, and I just couldn't quite put my finger on it. Call it a sixth sense or whatever, but it just felt evil or wrong. I went to my bed and sat down on the side of the bed and looked out the window and saw this freaky looking tree right outside the window. And then it happened. I got the most sense of evil coming from the tree itself. I know I've heard of objects being haunted and possessed, and that the spirit would reside in it until one day it would show itself to someone. I just never expected it to be me. I got the most intense sense of pure evil coming from this tree. I can only explain it as the tree seemed to be a conduit for some kind of evil, malevolent spirit, and it wanted to do me harm. In my mind, I could see the most horrific looking face in the tree. It was something that would make Stephen King and Wes Craven soil themselves, because it was that intense and horrifyingly ugly and inhumanly evil. That's all I felt coming from this thing. Nothing but pure evil, like it was taking pleasure in my fear that I was feeling. It had this inhuman laugh, and I got this feeling that it was telling me that it wanted to take me away. Here was in disbelief about the whole situation. I was in shock, unable to move, let alone think, as I felt this entity reaching out for me. I closed my eyes and told it that it couldn't have hurt me, and started to pray and call out to God for help. After about 10 minutes of praying, I felt this calm come over me, and I opened my eyes to see nothing more than the tree outside my window. The entity was gone, and I could no longer feel the presence or fear that I was feeling inside. The next thing I knew was the sun was just coming out to my relief, because I knew I had made it through my second encounter with the supernatural. It's Halloween, guys! It's the Phantom's Day! Grab your phantoms, have the coolest trickery, and run around and act like it's the greatest day on earth, because the dead are haunting your life, and you're happy to love them forever. Just kidding, guys. Anyway, just wanted to say, it's Halloween, obviously, if you guys didn't know, in America. And with that, it's such a great time to bring out these stories. Thank you guys so much for letting me be your witch, your phantom, your ghoulish trickery, your whatever you want to call it, and just letting me do whatever you want me to do. I don't know what I'm talking about still, but go ahead and leave a comment. I love to hear your thoughts on these stories. There were some amazing stories in here. I really like the black misty figure in the cemetery story. That was my favorite. But don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe, do all the greatest things that you can in life, like that, because apparently that's the most important thing in the world, which really it isn't, but you know what I mean. But anyway, guys, I'm gonna go. I'll see you later. See you in the next video. Good night, good morning. Love ya.